Ellen Ware, and I'm here to share my near-death experience. It happened when I was 12 years old, and that was really the beginning of my life. I used to love to ride horses, and I would go this time to my first Western lesson. And in this lesson, they put the saddle on the horse, and I didn't wear a helmet. Of course, that would happen that way. I love to ride, but often, when you're putting the saddle on a horse, they'll expand their belly because the cinch isn't comfortable. And that's what happened in this case. The horse expanded its belly, the cinch wasn't really tight. The cinch slipped toward the end of the lesson. And as it was told to me, I was holding on for dear life, kind of dragged a little bit, and then stepped on by the horse. And then the horse, out of fear, reared up and kicked me in the right temple. That was the beginning of my life. And though my parents were, there in the hospital with me, and they went through that horrible ordeal of having to sit with their child in ICU at Texas Hospital, I was actually in the light. I was on the other side. And it was the most beautiful and powerful and moving and wonderful experience of my life. And I'm so thankful to be alive to share it. The way it happened was my parents were told to play music or movies at my bedside to try and stimulate my mind because I was in a coma. I had been transferred from one hospital to a main hospital in Waco in the Dallas-Fort Worth area because their neurological team was much better and more well-versed in this kind of accident. I was in the ICU and I was in a coma. They were playing things daily for me, old home movies and things like that. But on the 5th day, they decided to play a Disney movie that was mostly music, 95% music. And that part of the story comes back later. But for me, the first thing I remember was being on a raft, and it was kind of a wooden raft on a pink cloud river. There was an ascended master in front of me, ascended Master Jesus. I knew him from my childhood growing up. And on my left, there was a younger, bald, thin man with long brown robes on that went almost to his feet. I felt really comfortable with this man, but I didn't know who he was at the time. I found out when I came out of years later as I was going through school. But Jesus didn't talk to me with words. He communicated through his mind. But before he communicated with me, I just felt this pervasive sense of connection and love, absolute love in his eyes. And I was taken then, ascended off of the raft up into a place of light. The first thing that I noticed was glimpses of this other world. It's almost as if now I see it as being kind of lifted into different realms of consciousness. And the first realm was this realm of light where there were different colored streams and trees and animals singing, maybe music playing that I'd never heard before that was just the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. And then I was taken into this golden light. And this was the true part of my near-death experience that still brings me to tears today. I felt this warmth around me like a weighted blanket, just this loving presence, this absolute connection with everything and everyone and everything that will be and everything that ever was. I felt this weight around me, even though I didn't have a physical body there. I could feel it moving in and around my essence until finally I just melted into this light. I became this beautiful golden light where nothing else mattered, and it was all love. There was no one, there was no name, there was no human construct at all. It was just love. Everything was love. Everyone was love. Everything. And I could have been there for lifetimes. I really could have. I mean, I don't even know how long I was there, but I found myself back on the raft soon after that. So, soon after that, I was back on the raft and Jesus was in front of me again. I had just experienced this amazing experience of the light, and I was in that place, in that vibration. I brought that back onto the raft with me. And it was at that point that I was asked a question. Do you want to stay or do you want to return to Earth? And I remember wanting to stay at first because it was so beautiful and so connected, and I felt home. I wanted to stay in that place. But then before I made the decision, I was shown things. And this is very common of near-death experiencers who get the choice. They get to see maybe things that they need to know before making the choice. Even though I didn't have my human mind in that moment, I was in my spirit body. I was of a greater consciousness. I was shown that my father's life and my brother's specifically wouldn't actualize into the path that they were meant to lead in this lifetime. I don't know why I was shown those particular glimpses, but I was, and it all was okay. I could have chosen to stay in the light and it would have been fine. And I knew that wholeheartedly, that everything would be fine. There was no right or wrong. So in that moment, I chose to live, actually. Outside of any human construct, I chose to live. And it was then that I was given a download of messages about why we're here now, what we're doing, what's important. Some of these things were that in our minds get distracted from the reality and presence of what we can truly accomplish and do, that our thoughts create our reality, and that we have conscious control over creation with source, that people matter. But much of what we think about and perseverate on, and our lives taken up by all these thoughts about who did what and all this takes us away from the reality of what we're here to do, and that we can lift each other up, that we can create a life of heaven on earth, and that we are here to learn. This is our learning ground. This and so many other messages came flooding to me. It was the most profound experience. But I received all of these messages. And then in an instant, after receiving these messages of many lifetimes, it could have been like hundreds of lifetimes of messages in one moment, I knew that I had chosen to live, and I was filled with this incredible, overwhelming sense of gratitude to get to come back and live and share this experience that I was in with the world. Like I knew somehow that this experience would be something that I could take back, that I could share, and that would become something that would bring hope and light to other people. So after making that choice, my heart filled with gratitude. And it was almost as if I fell on my knees in front of these masters, in front of Jesus specifically. And I gave thanks that I get to live, that I get to come back. And I made a vow that I would come back and use music to heal people. That was my choice. I just vowed that with everything in my being. And I made a promise that every night when I go to bed, no matter what happened in that day, I would be thankful for it. And I would go to sleep with gratitude. And that's what I do. Even when I move away from it, I come back to that practice because I know that that is how we create. That is how we connect. And that joy and gratitude are the greatest experience and expressions of love that we as humans can give to the collective, to the universe, to the divine, in order to co-create and to create that heaven on earth. And that's when things got really cool. I chose to use music for healing. I vowed to give thanks every day. And then everything went dark. But it wasn't a scary darkness. It was a beautiful darkness, like the darkness of a womb or creation. I felt the expansiveness of this place. And I felt once again as if my spirit body had boundaries. Like not a human form, but I was smaller somehow. In this darkness, I could see a staff of music in the distance, really far in the distance. And it had different colored music notes at every moment, like it was playing animated music, but I couldn't hear anything. I could just see all these notes moving along the staff, and the staff just got closer and closer and closer until it went through my head, or what would be my head. It went through me. It got bigger and bigger, closer and closer. And then it was dark, but only for a split second, because there was a point of light, a tiny point of light, far in the distance. Like I point down, kind of down to the right, because that's where I experienced it, this light, but it wasn't light at all. It was sound. And it was almost inaudible, really. But I was able to focus on that sound so intently, with so much energy and so much concentration, that I could bring it more fully into my mind until it was booming inside my head, truly booming. And the music was so loud at one point that I couldn't feel comfortable in it. And I knew that the only way was to force my eyes open. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done. To move myself back into my body was not a comfortable experience. I went from this huge expansion to moving into what I felt was like this small experience, but yet bigger than I could imagine, right? So I forced my eyes open, and the nurse ran over, and she talked to me, and she ran over and helped me, and then I slipped back out of consciousness. But before that happened, I was able to see things in the room, like the screen across the way, and I could see the TV that had been wheeled in next to the bed, because this was in the late 80s. It was rolling the credits of the Disney movie that had been played for me. And I knew that it was the music that woke me up from the coma, and the music that brought me back into my body. And then the real magic began. The magic of recovery, yes, I had to go through that a little bit, but the doctor said it was truly a miracle that the only other person in the state of Texas at the time that survived that type of head injury was also a child. She was 14, I was 12, but she was confined her entire life to a wheelchair. Others would not have lived through that. There was really no explanation. And I remember I jokingly would say, I'm a miracle. But I could walk and I could talk, but I had lost all of my memory prior to that. So I didn't really know the people in my life. I didn't know friends. I didn't have memories of first days of school. I didn't remember any of the things that most kids at age 12 would remember. I didn't. And the doctors told me whatever I did retrieve would be retrieved within the first 5 years of recovery. And it was very minimal. But I knew, and I had a sense about people, like who they were, their energy, their essence. And even though I didn't know their names, even some in my own family, I learned them quickly, and I started to recover. I threw myself into music. I started playing the flute. I had grown up playing piano. My mom was a piano teacher for a while. Her mom taught piano, her sisters. And I had been familiar with music and still had that musical part of my brain intact. And that became my passion. What I couldn't speak to my friends, what I couldn't understand in the world, because everything didn't make sense to me. Nothing made sense to me. I would play music. I would express myself. And, now that I'm a music therapist, I know that I was rebuilding brain cells and neurons by playing music. I was connecting to that realm in another way. So I didn't know how I was going to heal people with music. That came about later. When I woke up, I had very special gifts. I could see and sense light around people. I could understand them at a different level. I couldn't understand their words at all, which actually helped my intuitive gifts grow, because as I sat, my mom just said, just pretend like you know what they're talking about and smile and be nice. So I would, in my head injured, recovery, would just sit and listen to people. And I started to tap into something underneath what they were saying. I started to realize that people got caught in the story, but the story was not the focus. It was who they are, the connection, the relationship, and actually meeting and seeing people where they are and helping them to see something greater than the story and greater than themselves. I hid my gifts for a while because they weren't well received by some that I knew, and I didn't want to be made fun of as a kid, and I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to be like, hey, I can see light around people, I can see colors, and I'm getting these messages. But I had certain friends that I could work with and talk with about my gifts, and we would share and kind of teach each other through these gifts that were coming through. But it really all came full circle. After I did my undergrad, I majored in music with a minor in psychology, knowing that I had found out about this thing called music therapy. And music therapy was healing people with music, which is what I came back to do, right? So I found a university. My dad said, if you're going to do music therapy, you need a master's in psychology. I found one university that had both, a master's in music therapy and spiritual psychology. And it was a Buddhist university called Naropa. And it was founded and run out of Boulder, Colorado. When I went there, it was a culture of contemplation and meditative practices and moving inward and connecting with thoughts and becoming discerning of thoughts. And learning this practice was crucial for me to implement the messages that I received on the raft. We do have the ability to create our experience, and that our thoughts are the running movie of our life in our mind.